I mean, look at that. Look at that face. She doesn't even want to be on this team. Look at that Haley Van Lith draft day face. Wow. You want to literally, you look at her face and it is like, hello, darkness, my old friend. I mean, she's in hell too.
Look at that face. That's not excitement. That's not gratitude. That's the expression of someone who just realized they're walking into a nightmare. And honestly, she's not wrong to feel that way, because 16 days before the Indiana Fever drafted Raven Johnson with their second-round pick, she sat on a podcast and called Caitlin Clark fans racist. Claimed she was bullied, said people called her a monkey, all because Clark waved her off during a game 3 years ago. And now somehow she's supposed to be teammates with the person whose fan base she just torched.
Scratched Raven Johnson's name off as any kind of potential draft pick and said, okay, we are not going to bring this into our locker room. We're not going to do this to our fan base. Are they that out of touch with what's going on? They're still getting destroyed, folks. Men's sports.
Here's what makes this decision so baffling. The Indiana Fever aren't just any WNBA franchise anymore. They're the league's marquee team, the Dallas Cowboys. The New York Yankees, they sold out every home game last season, drew over 3 million viewers for nationally televised matchups, and single-handedly drove a 48% ratings increase across the entire league. All because of Caitlin Clark and the fan base that follows her everywhere. So when general manager Amber Cox and head coach Stephanie White walked up to that draft podium on April 14th, they had to know what they were doing. They had to understand that drafting someone who publicly attacked their paying customers would create an immediate crisis. The question is, did they even care?
That's gonna happen. That's not gonna happen. I think the fan base is pissed off. Facepalm. Everyone right now, including Raven. Yikes. Introducing our soon-to-be locker room cancer. My dog's going nuts.
Let's be clear about what happened on that podcast. This wasn't a vague comment taken out of context. Raven Johnson specifically said Caitlin Clark fans represented the dark side of women's basketball. She claims she received racist messages and death threats directly because of that wave-off moment in 2022. And she connected all of that toxicity directly to Clark's supporters. Now, were some fans out of line? Probably. The internet brings out the worst in people. But to paint an entire fan base with that brush, especially when those same fans are about to become your teammate's primary revenue source, that's not just poor judgment, that's organizational malpractice by the Fever front office for not immediately removing her from their draft board.
With Caitlin, Tyasha Harris, and now Raven at point guard, how does that help you, especially with all the injuries you had last year and just Raven's defensive versatility?
Well, we're not speaking those into existence anymore. But I think it helps because Ty is a player who's a combo who can play on and off the ball. Caitlin is a player who can play on and off the ball. Raven is a point guard that primarily has had the ball in her hands, and so I think it gives us some versatility. Thankfully, having a couple of different guards gives us the ability to allow Kelsey to rest a little bit.
And here's where it gets worse. Stephanie White stood in front of reporters after the draft and tried to justify this pick on basketball terms. Talked about defensive versatility, mentioned how Raven can handle the ball and give Kelsey Mitchell rest, said they can go to a defensive lineup when needed. All legitimate basketball reasoning, except it completely ignores the elephant in the room. You don't get to draft someone who just spent 20 minutes trashing your fan base and then pretend it's purely a basketball decision. That's not how this works. Not when you're running the most scrutinized franchise in the WNBA. Not when every move you make gets analyzed by millions of people who just watched you go 7-33 2 seasons ago. The Fever brass seems fundamentally confused about what they're managing now. This isn't 2022 anymore when they could make quiet moves that nobody noticed. They have the biggest platform in women's basketball, and they're using it to make enemies of their own supporters.
I hope she can count down from 10 to 1. Wow. They're doing, yeah, right here. Perfect. Stop this shit. Whoever the admin is, stop this shit. We aren't buying it. Don't justify this garbage pick. I'm going to be a sponge and soak everything up.
Look at the social media response. Fever fans are at war with each other. You've got one group saying trust the process, it's just basketball, while another group is pointing out that locker room chemistry matters and you can't ignore what she said. Meanwhile, South Carolina fans are flooding Indiana Fever posts defending Raven and attacking Clark supporters for being upset. The franchise created this mess. They threw a grenade into their own community and then acted surprised when it exploded. And it's not like they didn't have options. This was the second round. They could have taken any number of players who didn't come with this baggage. Could have drafted someone who actually wanted to be there, whose face didn't look like they were attending a funeral when their name got called.
You know who you are that follows this team. If you do not directly ask about these comments to Indiana Fever leadership, the coach, and get answers from everybody, then take your journalism degrees and wipe your ass with them. They're worthless. And you're everything wrong with media. I've got a sneaking suspicion none of you have enough hair on your balls to do your job.
Here's what the Indiana Fever media needs to do right now. Every single reporter who covers this team has a responsibility to ask direct questions, not softballs, not how excited are you to add Ravens defense, real journalism. Did Amber Cox and Stephanie White know about those podcast comments before the draft? If yes, what was their justification for proceeding anyway? If no, how did they miss something that every Fever fan knew about for 2 weeks? Did they consider the impact on team chemistry? Did they talk to Caitlin Clark before making this pick? Did they consult with veteran players about bringing in someone who publicly attacked the fan base? These aren't gotcha questions. These are basic accountability measures that any major sports franchise should expect. The Fever generated $1.8 billion in economic impact for Indianapolis last season. The fans funding that deserve answers.
Oh my God, there's those crazy Fever fans. There's those crazy Caitlin Clark fans. No, we don't like to be shit on by somebody, and we're not happy when they ignore us, the paying customer. The paying customer. The one that helped you get this CBA deal done because of the money. The eyeballs, the viewership. Oh, that's that crazy Indiana Fever fan base, girl. Yeah, those.
But here's what's probably going to happen instead. Most of the beat reporters will write their standard draft analysis pieces. They'll quote Stephanie White's comments about defensive versatility. They'll mention Ravens SEC Defensive Player of the Year award from 2024. They'll talk about fit and roster construction. And they'll completely avoid the controversy because that's easier, because asking tough questions might cost them access, because it's uncomfortable to point out that the organization just made a decision that alienated a significant portion of their fan base. That's not journalism, that's public relations. And if the Indiana media lets this slide without demanding real answers, they're complicit in the problem. So let's talk about what this actually means for the Fever moving forward. Because this isn't just about one second-round draft pick. This is about organizational philosophy and whether the front office understands what they're managing. The Indiana Fever have something unprecedented in WNBA history. They have a generational talent in Caitlin Clark who brings mainstream attention everywhere she goes. They have a fan base that will pack arenas, buy merchandise, and drive television ratings to levels this league has never seen. They have corporate sponsors lining up for partnership opportunities. They have political leaders in Indianapolis talking about building a new practice facility because of the economic impact. And they're treating all of that like it's disposable, like they can make decisions that anger their core supporters and it won't matter because people will show up anyway. That's the kind of arrogance that destroys franchises. Look at what happened last season. The Fever went 13-27 despite having the Rookie of the Year. They had coaching dysfunction with Christy Sides making questionable rotations and timeout decisions. They had roster construction issues with players who didn't fit together. They had an entire season where it felt like the organization was actively working against its own success. And instead of learning from that, instead of recognizing that they need to do everything possible to maximize this window with Clark, they're creating new problems. They're drafting players with obvious baggage. They're ignoring fan concerns. They're acting like the rules that apply to every other major sports franchise somehow don't apply to them. Here's what makes the Raven Johnson situation particularly frustrating. There were legitimate basketball reasons not to draft her even before the podcast comments. She's a point guard who needs the ball in her hands to be effective, but the Fever already have Caitlin Clark running the offense. She shot 29% from three-point range during her college career, which means defenses can sag off her and clog the paint. She's listed at 5'8", which creates defensive matchup problems against bigger WNBA guards. So even if she'd never said a word about Clark, fans, you could argue this wasn't a great fit. But when you add in the fact that she publicly attacked the fan base just 16 days before the draft, it becomes indefensible. The Fever had every reason to pass on her and zero good reasons to pick her, and they did it anyway. That suggests one of two things. Either the front office is completely incompetent and didn't do basic research on their draft prospects, or they knew exactly what they were doing and didn't care. Neither option is acceptable. Neither option gives Fever fans any confidence that this organization knows how to build around a generational talent. Think about the message this sends to Caitlin Clark. Your front office just drafted someone who called your fans racist. Someone who blamed you, at least indirectly, for harassment she received. Someone who's going to walk into that locker room carrying all of that baggage. And the organization expects you to just be professional about it and make it work. That's not fair to Clark. She didn't ask for any of this. She's trying to win basketball games and build a championship contender. And her own front office keeps creating unnecessary distractions that make that harder. Now let's talk about Raven Johnson herself for a moment. Because she's in an impossible position too. She didn't ask to be drafted by Indiana. Based on her facial expression when her name was called, she clearly didn't want to be there. And now she's walking into a situation where a significant portion of the fan base resents her before she's played a single minute. That's not a recipe for success. That's not how you develop young players. That's how you create locker room tension and media circuses that distract from basketball. And here's the thing about locker room chemistry that front offices sometimes forget. You can't fake it. You can't force players to like each other or trust each other. Either that bond exists or it doesn't. And when you draft someone who publicly attacked your franchise players' supporters, you're starting from a deficit that might be impossible to overcome. Veteran players notice these things. They see when the front office makes decisions that create unnecessary drama. They see when management prioritizes other considerations over team cohesion, and they remember it when their contracts come up and they're deciding whether to re-sign or test free agency. The Fever can't afford to lose players because of front office dysfunction, not when they're trying to build around Caitlin Clark, not when they finally have a chance to be relevant after years of irrelevance. Every decision matters now. Every move gets scrutinized, and this one failed the test. So what should happen next? At minimum, the Indiana Fever owe their fan base a real explanation. Not coach speak about defensive versatility. Not generic comments about trusting the process. A genuine accounting of how this decision got made and what they were thinking. Did they consider the podcast comments? Did they talk to Caitlin Clark? Did they weigh the potential locker room issues? Did they think about fan reaction? And if they did all of that and still decided to draft Raven Johnson, what was the justification? Fans deserve those answers. Season ticket holders who are paying premium prices deserve those answers. Corporate sponsors who are investing millions deserve those answers. The media that covers this team daily deserves those answers. And if the Fever refuse to provide them, that tells you everything you need to know about how they view accountability. It tells you they think they can make whatever decisions they want without consequences. It tells you they don't respect the intelligence of their own supporters. That's not sustainable. Not in modern sports. Not when fans have platforms to voice their displeasure. Not when every game gets broadcast nationally and every controversy becomes a story. The WNBA is at a crossroads right now. The league just signed a new media rights deal worth $2.2 billion over 11 years, largely because of the attention Caitlin Clark brought to the sport. Expansion franchises are paying $50 million for the opportunity to join. Corporate sponsors are flooding in with money. All of that success comes with higher expectations. Fans who are paying attention expect professional operations. They expect smart decision making. They expect organizations that understand public relations and fan management. They expect accountability when mistakes get made. The Indiana Fever are failing that test right now. And if they don't course correct quickly, they're going to waste the most valuable asset any WNBA franchise has ever had. They're going to look back in 5 years and wonder why they couldn't build a championship contender around a generational talent. And the answer will be obvious to everyone who's paying attention right now. So here's my question for you. Is this incompetence or intentional? Did the Fever front office genuinely not know about Raven Johnson's podcast comments, or did they know and just not care? Because both options are damning, but for different reasons. Drop your take in the comments and tell me if you think this relationship can actually work or if it's doomed from the start.